Also, we did not deserve that high five because somehow we
There's
should
my
have all knew
permission.
that.
I feel like it was clever enough. Like I mean, I did some very technical things there. I switched my default browser to Safari so that when I went live, it would go to Safari. That's really something.
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
Well, there's a problem now.
Hopefully, we won't hear ourselves.
Now it's the problem.
How about mute? There.
Great.
Okay, and Zach, you can still hear us, right?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, people. YouTube people. We had a little bit of technical
Why?
difficulties there, but we have since
How do you always get it first?
figured it out.
Hi, Kaylee. Hey, Karen.
Why? Why can I never see the goddamn live video?
I don't know. I don't know if you know how the internet works.
He changed Hot Bob to All By Myself. Nicole,
I still don't
that
have
is
the
a
live.
great
What the
question,
fuck?
and to answer it, I say the power.
Yeah. Now you see how addicting it is. You see how
Yeah.
addicting it is. You want to do you want to do the shock intro thing with Zach and so see how fun that is?
I couldn't possibly. That doesn't seem like something. Hey, everybody!
Finally.
Welcome to YouTube Live.
It is the YouTube Live chat.
It's Truth and Justice, and we are all jazzed up and ready to talk truth.
That's right. It's
And justice.
Yeah,
me
brother.
and JV coming from Palm Springs, California. Let's fail. Yeah.
Great.
Real over that.
So-
Me and Hulk are real over that.
I hope that answers your question, Nicole.
Also, please note how Bob set this up so that he looks well lit and handsome as all get out, and then I'm over here like, hello, don't look at me, leave me in shadow.
If you think anyone in there believes that I figured out where the sun would be at this particular time when
Hold
I
on.
set this up
If
in the
I-
dark last night.
Let me set up a series of mirrors so that bounces back to this, bounces back to me.
Yeah, there you go. All we'd have to do is just turn the whole table that way and we'd both be getting it.
Not happening.
Yeah. I look fabulous.
Yeah, you do look fabulous.
Yeah, easy on that shit.
Do not look fabulous. I had somebody take some selfies with me at the event last night, and they were like, very like, I'm sorry, everything has a filter. I'm like, I don't know what you're apologizing to me for. I look fantastic in those pictures.
Fabulous.
I would much rather the selfie with the filter than the people that like take a frumpy shot of my full body from 10 feet away. Always standing next to Janet, who is literally 1/3 of my size.
Yeah.
It's just not helpful at all.
I had to reassure Michelle quickly that the dream I had where he had a weird neck did not come to fruition. His neck is just fine.
Yeah, look.
Let's
yeah.
all celebrate
It's,
that.
it's not smoke and mirrors. I can actually move my neck.
Yeah.
Yep, and I can sit up straight.
Well,
We are
I
actually
can
laying
pan
down.
the camera around. There's just a giant brace back
Yeah,
here, like
Yeah.
I'm
Or
in
the-
good posture.
Or that picture is actually on the floor and the camera's on the ceiling. We're just laying. flat
We
on our
should
back.
put the picture on the floor. Be on the. I don't know.
Boy.
Boy, oh boy. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be a hard
Oh,
episode to get
I
through.
keep forgetting that you have to turn it back off
Yeah,
again, or it
some of
just
them do.
awkwardly goes on forever.
Mhm. Oh, why didn't I take the time to do the important work of downloading all by myself and putting it on here for
don't
for
know.
poor Zach?
What an
It happens. It happens.
Oh, so we're glad everybody's here. Let me look through the. Man, that's kind of far away for me to read the chat ski.
You remember how to do the pop-out thing?
Button, I mean, I got a pretty good little setup here. Bob,
I mean, you say that,
Oled,
but you could do the pop-out thing and make it bigger. You know
this is
that, right?
adorable, lonely Zach, making murky waters clear again. Oh, there's the next T-shirt that nobody's gonna buy. Just kidding. Oh, don't let me forget when we start recording. Talk about the T-shirts when they're getting delivered because I
Oh, good.
fucked up.
Oh. You almost sounded proud of yourself until the very end, and then you still kind of sounded proud of yourself. It's like, I fucked up. Who's with me?
Oh, well, because and I don't know if anybody even remembers, but when I first said it, I was like, we're going to do it at the end of November. That way, like, everybody can get their shirts by Christmas. And like we put it out, and then it was like there weren't enough, and we added some designs. And we're like, I'm going to push it back and get another week to get everybody to
Yeah.
get their. And then I like sent the orders in, and then I messaged the lady, and I was like, So when can we? When will the shirts be coming in? Nobody's asked yet, but I'm sure people are going to wonder when they're going to get their shirts.
Sure.
And she's like, "Yeah, your order is on the docket to be printed on January 9th."
Oh.
And I was like,
Isn't that
I told everyone
yeah.
that they would be ready by Christmas.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Well, yeah, but you waited a week and it's Christmas time, so I had 1,000 orders come in between that week, and so it's going to go in order."
Okay.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
And I told her that I was going to blame her, and I just bailed on it. I was like, "That's fine. I'm actually going to say that you fucked up when I go on the podcast and say why it's going to take so long.
You're gonna say that
It's her fault.
she did.
Yeah,
Nope.
she lied to me, and we're going to have to get another new T-shirt
Nope.
person.
Nope. You only get to do that once.
Yep.
And you did it.
Is that Devin? DMC said the guilt trip worked out
Yes.
and I bought a shirt. Yeah.
That's what.
Yep, that's Devin.
We ended up selling a pretty fair number of them, like kind of
You
a mixed
threatened
bag
everybody's
of
lives.
different designs. We're just gonna keep Hulk there the whole time, huh?
I think so.
Okay.
I think it's a good look.
I have no notes because there's.
I'll get rid of him when he gets serious.
Obviously when we start, we should talk about kind of like the trip and the things we found out from the trip. At the end, I have to remember that I've got some new information that I have now that I didn't have when I recorded Sunday's episode, so I should preface that.
Okay, well, these are all things I would normally incorporate into the thing I've already prepared and sent to myself. So
Yeah,
sorry.
good.
We were only We were only together the last 48 hours. Like we only
Right.
could have discussed this.
Minus the 10 hours total that we've slept since. Well, you slept because you left me and Brandon out there all by ourselves.
I did.
Yeah, normally I like write a little post-it note of things like that, and I forgot it. So
Sometimes he has a piece of paper and I crumple it up and throw it.
Yeah. So when you're about ready, let me know. We'll start, and I'll come in first and try to like dump that stuff out before I forget it.
Okay, I know I'm doing the right password for this.
I've watched you
thing.
type the password in several times.
Yeah, it's definitely not working.
Oh, for the Wi-Fi here?
Yeah. It's the same one I've used over and over and over.
Do you want me to go grab one?
No, I know what it is. Like I absolutely know.
Let me
what it
open
is.
my thing.
I like
will
this comment, Bob.
share it
I
with
really
you.
like this comment. It says we were solely motivated by the promise of Ahoy t-shirts. That's why they bought other ones.
That's it. So put a pin in that.
Gotcha. See if it asks me to.
Yeah, why is it not?
Asking, do you want to try to type it in and see if it says, do you want to share the Wi-Fi? It's not saying it.
No, it's not even letting me like have it as an option to join.
There it is. Boom. Share.
Oh, thank
Share.
you. Hey,
Good podcasting.
everybody.
Very good podcasting.
Very
I'm
compelling
really
stuff.
happy that we're on live.
Yeah.
Really, really happy we're on live so everybody watches this and sees what's
I
happening
mean,
right now.
everyone but me had the opportunity to fill that space with something while I was trying to get this up, but everyone sat in silence as if I was a doctor who said, "I need absolute silence for this surgery.
It's like, wait, she's doing something
Lives
important.
are at risk."
Listen, this is what happens when
I just thought Bob was taking a drink and, he has to drink in silence. So
Yeah, hang on.
Everyone wait while I drank. Yeah.
Hang on. I do that I never realize how often I do that. And now I catch myself doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Even it's always like all in the middle of me talking, like my throat's
Like
really
it,
dry.
Nick, good
So I'm
one.
like, hang on just a second. And I do the finger because, we're on Zoom and we're recording. I'm like, this would be a cleaner edit if you just shut the fuck up for a minute.
It's about the cleaner edit.
Yeah. But then I'm like, every time that I crack, I chuckle. Are you getting close to being ready there, Jamie?
Me? Yeah, I'm great.
Yep. You got your outline?
Yeah.
And
I'm acting like I've always had. Yeah, obviously.
okay. It's neat to sit on this side of it to see, because I always see you like with devices doing stuff and I don't know what's happening, but I see you have the chat there on your
I have the
on your
chat
lap.
on. It's a lot. Hey guys, it's a lot. So I'm gonna put this down.
Okay.
I've got the questions here. I've got the chat here, and
we got some Ahoy people. I'm just saying.
Some Ahoy people.
We want people that want Ahoy shirts.
Oh, funny. Who wins the internet today is Nick Bowman, who says it's rated ARG. That's real nice. It's like you heard of it. Oh, I didn't realize there was a setup for a joke. He said, Zach, have you heard of the new pirate movie? It's rated ARG.
Yeah.
I didn't see the setup. Good one. The Ahoy shirt. Okay, are we ready to start? Okay, here we go. I'm going to do this for Kelly. Now she'll know that's where it starts.
That's
They're
where
saying I'm
Bob
louder
lost
than you guys.
His mind. That's what we'll tell the doctors.
Kathy's saying I'm louder than you two. but I
You probably
can't
are.
do anything to fix that.
I can't either.
That's fine. It's more important for me to be loud.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know
Great.
what else because that just got real echoey when I did that.
Great.
So we'll just call that good.
Okay.
Uh, here we go. All right, before we get started, I also want to point out I'm usually not in the room when Zach does the intro, and I was in the room when he's like, "Do you know that he does those in one take?
Yeah.
He nailed
He's
it.
a one-take wonder.
It was like the best intro
I
I've ever
try.
heard in my whole
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I
He
try.
prepares in advance, has something he's going to say, says it flawlessly, and we move on.
I didn't even know that was a thing in podcasting.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Good job, Zach. Of course, he didn't have us there to distract him and bother him with our child.
That's usually when I screw up, is when you guys get me giggling, and then it's over.
Right.
Well, we will not be having any fun today, my friend.
That's
so
right.
worry not.
For those of you that don't know, Janet and I have finally met in person for the first time. We have spent the last 48 hours together. We're actually staying together in an Airbnb along with Janet's partner. Everybody's here.
Oh,
and
cool!
So
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, don't say everybody's here. There's really
everybody of importance is here. But the point being that now that we've spent 48 hours together, we realize how much we don't care for one another, and the fun is going to be over with now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough.
So what's going on with you, Zach?
All right.
All right.
A lot
Sorry.
of crickets in Palm Springs. A lot of crickets in
Yeah.
Palm Springs.
Sorry about that,
A
Kelly.
lot of daytime crickets.
I'll just leave that up to you, Kelly, on how to clean that up.
Good luck with that, Kelly. We love you.
So Janet and I are here together out in the desert, and we have done quite a bit of stuff. We went up to the crime scene. We've actually tracked down and found a witness. We've done the meetup. We're going to LA today for another event. It's been awesome to actually meet Janet in person. Dr. Shiloh was here on one night or 2 days. She was here Sunday and Monday and did some work with us, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. A couple little housekeeping things. One. The shirts, no one's asked yet, which I appreciate, but I wanted to ahead of time let you guys know that I screwed up on the shirts. You're going to get your shirts and they're going to be perfect. But where I screwed up is when I initially told you guys to order. I was like, we're going to do it by the end of November so everybody can get their shirts by Christmas. And then I said, I'm going to leave the orders open for another week. Because we added all the designs there, and then I sent them in and I asked the t-shirt printer when they're going to be printed, and she said they're slated to be printed January 9th. And I was like, hey, you said they'd be ready by Christmas. And she said, yeah, but you waited another week and a bunch of orders came in between there, and it's holidays. So not her fault, my fault. Because I didn't run that by her when I pushed the date back. So just so you know, your shirts will be coming. They're coming. The orders are in. They're ready to get printed and go. But it'll be like I believe she said January 9th. They're slated to be printed and shipped. So
Okay. So if you were going to give one as a gift to someone, you have to do the thing I've sometimes had to do when I bought something late, where you print out a photo of the thing,
Yeah.
snip it out so it's a t-shirt shape, slip it into a card,
Yeah.
give it to someone and say, I'm so sorry.
yeah, and do you see how much more fun that is than giving them the
Oh,
actual
yeah. Very
shirt?
fun.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Then they get a whole nother
You
experience.
get an art project.
Later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that they get to
Absolutely.
open up later. So yeah, there was the shirt thing. I do want to mention, and I probably should do it at the end. Can you remind me at the end when we talk about what's coming Sunday? I'll figure it out then.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed that
I sure will, Bob.
somebody in the YouTube
Someone
chat.
in the chat will definitely.
If we're about to
help me.
close and I didn't tell you about the new information I got after I recorded the episode that's coming out on Sunday in the YouTube chat, let me know.
Got it.
So we don't just muddy the waters with that now. And I just said 4 things that I needed to talk about before we started recording.
Mm-hmm. Did you cover all of them? I think you did. You definitely said, remind me about the new information. You definitely said, remind me about the t-shirts.
Okay.
That might be it.
That might have been it.
That
Okay.
might be 4. Those 2 things might be 4.
Those 2 things might be the 4 things.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and the other stuff was just talking about a trip, which we can do now before we get into your questions. First of all, Zach, how's your week been?
Lonely by myself, but getting through it. We'll be all right.
Buddy.
Good. Well, we've had
Oh, fair.
a wonderful time out here. So I'll just kind of walk through my week starting when I got here and some of the stuff that we've done. So Sunday afternoon, I got in, and Dr. Shiloh came down from LA, and then we went and had dinner with. I'm pretty sure it's okay. Yeah, it'd be okay to say his name because he's on the page, and I'm sure he's talking about it. Andrew Nielsen, who a lot of you guys know is on our Facebook groups. He's a retired Riverside sheriff. And we've had he makes lots of great posts, lots of great discussion. He met with Dr. Shiloh and I. We all had dinner together. And then at 9:00 at night on Sunday, we went up the hill because we wanted to do a drive test with all of us together. For those of you that don't know, Andrew did a drive test on his own back this summer, and I believe it was on a Sunday night. That was just for a cough that time. And he was able to make the drive in 35 minutes, which is absolutely, and it was, I mean, 100% he did it. He filmed the whole thing, and he made it happen. He was going real fast down the road. In fact, where he was kind of bumping up against people, and they had to get out of his way on the way down. But we wanted to do, I kind of wanted to create a scenario similar to the state's theory, which the state's theory was that Christian was driving. Also, I think he said he had a truck and Shiloh had her car. But the theory was that Christian was driving, who had never been to Pinyon Pines before. Shiloh had never been to Pinyon Pines before, so she drove. And then in that theory, Robert would have had to been the one navigating, who has been up to the Friedli's house a handful of times, but hadn't been there for a while. I've been up there a handful of times, haven't been up there since June. So I sat in the front seat and navigated, and then Andrew was in the back too, kind of, because we all were kind of, which way do we think we should go and stuff like that.
Right.
So we did make the drive, and Shiloh was moving faster than I was comfortable with, and then Andrew was like, but it was a good mix because you had me going like whoa around the switchbacks, and in the back Andrew's going. Just so you know, I was much further ahead than you went this time. Like I was driving faster. So it was kind of a nice, kind of happy medium in there. But Shiloh made the drive. The end of the story is it took her 44 minutes to make the drive, which of course is too long. But there was also we had to go like a little bit past where they would have went because the on-off ramp moved. And we timed that, and we all agreed that added a minute, so we took that back off, so it would have been 43 minutes, which, of course, I mean, if that's how long it took, then that makes it impossible for them to be at the crime scene. But what we have is this data of Andrew showed that it can be done in 35 or 36 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I did it once. Of course, I went a very different route. Mine took 52 minutes. And then Shiloh did it, and it took her 44 minutes. So there's certainly nothing definitive there. I feel very confident about her number because we actually got lucky and didn't run into a single vehicle on the way down. So we never had somebody in front of us that we had to wait for them to get out of our way. And we got real lucky with the lights going through when we were heading out towards the highway. Mm-hmm. I was watching her speed; she was never below the speed limit. She was even going above the yellow ones, ones on the curve that say don't go over 35.
Oh.
Yeah, she was, and I kept mentioning to her because they're both retired. Well, he's a retired cop. She works for the police department.
Yeah.
And I for years taught EVOC training, which is emergency vehicle operation training. And so I just kept reminding her that, you're never supposed to go over the yellow signs. Those are the important ones. But she did anyway. So that's, yeah. So not for nothing, it took her, with what we calculated out, 43 minutes. She was moving very fast. And certainly I acknowledge that you could drive faster, because Andrew did. We saw him do it. Mm-hmm. So like when we were going down kind of the home stretch down 74 when we were coming into town, the speed limit I think is 55, and she was doing like 62. And I don't know how fast he was going, but I would have to suspect that he was probably 75, 80 mile an hour coming through there. So you just have to figure out for yourself where somebody would be risking getting pulled over at that point, or who knows. Right. So all those factors go in, but Shiloh's test took 43 minutes doing that.
But she brought up a really interesting point, which was at a certain point, sort of getting out of the dirt roads, getting out of the Pinyon Pines community, heading down deeper into the valley, starting to maybe see a car or two more. Didn't she say, like, at some point, I sort of feel like I don't need to speed anymore.
Right.
It feels like I've gotten away.
Her exact words were, it feels like, and it was interesting. It was kind of a light bulb moment for me. So we went up to the crime. Again, it's pitch black. I wanted them to get out of the car and experience how dark and there was a big moon that night, but it was still very, very dark up there. But there's no way I could describe to someone in words the feeling of the vast stillness and eerie silence and darkness up there until you get out and experience. And literally the only thing you hear are coyotes howling all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's all you hear. So we parked, and I said, shut the lights off. I wanted to walk around a little bit, but we got out of the car, took a few steps. Jackrabbit ran across the driveway, and they were both like pretty much done with that experience. We got back in the car. We did not go walking around back in the desert. But so then we were like, okay, we start the timer right. We started right at 9:00, which I know was an hour early, but we just weren't going to sit there for an hour. So right at 9:00, we hit it, and Shiloh starts going down the roads, pretty rough. And we get to a certain point at the south end of the neighborhood, and she just offhandedly said, "I feel like I've gotten away already." And when you realize at that point, anybody who's local, if you go driving around up there, you'll kind of see what she meant. But you very much, once you get, the neighborhood's kind of like if you took two squares and they're kind of stacked off-centered from each other. Once you kind of get to that bottom section of the neighborhood, you very much feel like you're in a different world. Like you have gotten completely away. You're now in a different place.
Yeah.
And then so we started having the conversation of, so would you continue like driving like a bat out of hell now? And we thought, well, maybe like until you get to like 74, but for sure, once you get to the highway, once you get to the paved highway, my throat is so dry. Is the desert so dry? Oh my God.
Hydrate.
I didn't put my finger up.
Good for you.
And I said, for sure, once you get to you feel very, very removed from the crime scene. And so then the question you start asking yourself, because we're looking at like, can you do it if you're driving 75 miles an hour down this mountain road? Yeah, you can. Andrew proved that you can. But the question is, why? And of course, this is very subjective, because you can't say, I would never.
Right.
Because, and you could say, well, now at this point, you just want to blend in and not get pulled over. We don't know the state of mind of whoever it was that was doing this. If there was anybody, I don't think anybody was driving anything, but we'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like, why? And then at what point do you decide I've gotten away? If it's not when you're to the south end of the neighborhood, if it's not when you're out of the neighborhood on the street past the fire station where they're already rolling, they're already up to the scene.
Right.
At some point, you have to say, okay, I'm comfortable now. I've gotten away.
Right.
And when is that?
Yeah, but isn't
point?
there the thought? Isn't there the thought of trying to get cleaned up? Like, I understand what you're saying, but I think a lot of people have the other idea of that would be more like, it's not just that I got away; it's that I need to hurry up and get cleaned up before anybody knows anything.
Yeah. Well, I think Andrew pointed out, I was like, well, you're trying to hurry up and get down there and create an alibi. But the reason I push back against that, and certainly that could be the case, clean up, create an alibi, is that they didn't. They didn't right. Oh, I couldn't have done it because I was here, here, and here.
Right.
If you listen to like Robert's interview the day after, there's no indication in that interview that he knows what time this happened. Okay. And that he's like, oh no, he asked him to walk through his day, and he tells him, yeah, we were doing this, and we were out doing the paintball thing, and my cousin texted me and wanted me to get chapstick. We went to AMPM, get chapstick, and went home. He doesn't give him times, and so if it's like getting down to create an alibi, you would expect to hear, no, at 9:30 I know that I was here, and at 10 o'clock I was here, and point being, and you could say, well, that's because he's smart enough to know not to do that, or you could say, it just seems like they didn't know they needed to make an alibi. But my point to that is that if the point was to get down the hill quickly so they could create an alibi, I don't believe that, because they didn't create an alibi.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I guess part of the takeaway that I have, and that I guess I'll just say here, is that if somebody is going to point to these conversations and say, like, you're being so subjective about it, you're not proving anything. Like, I don't think you're saying that this particular argument that the state made, which is like flimsy, and also doesn't to me really prove anything, was a huge point and factor in how they felt they were proving something. And I would never take what you've experimented with and try to use it in court.
Oh, of course not.
Nor do I feel they should have, based on what they had to try to cobble together to make it work. Like, to me, the cell phone stuff, it's not so much about like, oh my God, we prove they were lying and we prove the state was wrong. It's more like, this isn't just, it's just not reliable. Like, to me,
Right.
it's not a reliable point of contention to the degree where you should be able to use it to convict two young men. I just,
Yeah.
that's what I keep seeing over and over and over again, is like, it's just not, it is subjective, and like proving that it's possible. It's like the Adnan drive thing. It's like Adnan relied so heavily on Sarah Koenig not being able to make that trip in the time she said,
Right.
and they were able to do it. And guess what? None of it mattered,
Except
because
they weren't, but
none
that's
of
a whole
that.
other
Well,
thing.
I understand that, but if they are able to say they could, and you put it out into the world, just like the state puts it out into the courtroom,
Yeah.
then everyone goes, well, I guess it is possible. That must mean they killed her. Like, there's all of the other pieces floating around that are like, please don't think we're saying we've now proved they're innocent because of that.
No.
That's not what anybody's saying. It's just
Right.
about the experiments of how much sense does this make?
Well-
I think that's, and maybe it makes all the sense in the world. It doesn't change a lot of the other facts in the case.
Yeah, and I think that, like, what it does is say, like, the state presented to the jury, they absolutely could have left there and been here, and that's what we're telling you. They were here at this time, and then they were here at this time, and they presented it as proof that because of their test.
Right.
And all we're saying is we have found out that there's a lot of, it's troublesome.
Right.
Right. Is that to say that absolutely because Ryan Bodmer could make that drive test in that time, I'm just saying that doesn't prove they could have done that.
Yeah.
It just proves he could have done it. And by me saying, well, it took me 52 minutes, doesn't mean I've proven that they couldn't have done that.
Right.
It just proved that I couldn't. You know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah.
it's just showing that there's a lot of ambiguity here, and it's not nearly as black and white as the state would want the jury to believe.
Right. And it sort of reminds you, and I say culpability on both sides, defense and prosecution, in cases like this, where we've seen situations where a crime scene tech, or, you know, an expert, a supposed blood spatter expert, we find out does something 35 times. I'm not quoting the staircase directly. I don't remember how many times that guy did it, but you know, like, you do the experiment till you get it right.
Right.
And that happens on both sides. It happens on defense, it happens
Yeah.
on prosecution. The problem is, how forthcoming are you going to be? Like, I don't know how many drive tests they did to get that number. I don't know how many times you hit you hit a watermelon with a baseball bat to get the result you're looking for. Like, I'm not there for those. So a lot of it becomes like, what's being communicated to all parties for,
Yeah.
you know, Brady and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so for me, what I'm trying to do is get an idea of what I think could have happened or didn't happen, and my position on it. After I think that the Dr. Shiloh's drive test was, for me, the most reasonable expectation of what someone could do in that situation. And so for me, it seems like, I think that 43 minutes is about as reasonable of a time as you can expect. But also, I'll point out too that I've never believed 38 minutes as the number
There
that
you
we're
go.
dealing with for two reasons. One, as I don't want to harp on it anymore, but over and over again, if you look at the forensic anthropologist's actual study, actual investigation, actual report, it shows up the range is up to 10 to 20 minutes. The prosecutor got her to say, well, the range could be, I guess, more up to 30. So we're using 30, but really the number's 20. So that's thing one. Thing two is most people, even, well, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but a lot of people, even people that believe they're guilty, agree that the killers they didn't drive their car into the driveway and leave. I mean, so they had to, at the very least, leave on foot and make their way to the car before they leave, which then of course adds more time to the whole situation. So, like, to me, like, we're looking like if you actually take those data points and put them together, you're looking at, like, they would have had to make that drive in like 15 to 20 minutes, not 38 minutes.
You know what other information would be helpful is, I'd love to see some text logs I believe that might make a difference. I feel we've talked about that before, like points of origin for texts or timing for having service. If you're getting away, like doesn't that add a monkey wrench in as well? Like, what if we knew?
I don't know if I'm following you.
I'm saying, what if texts were sent at a time when it wouldn't have been possible to send or receive a text if you were still up the hill
Oh, like the one
before the phone call,
the chapstick
before phone
one.
call, and before
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be nice to know that?
it would be huge to know
Because
that,
if
yeah.
Nicole, to your point, I think it's a great point. If chapstick's the alibi, I'd love to see whether they check that, and I'd love to see if that text happened. Unfortunately, we don't have that information. I
Yeah.
think it's such a great point, Nicole. Unfortunately, it would just be great to see that alibi was checked or
Yeah.
that the text happened.
And that's upsetting because it could have been very easy to see if the state, when they pulled the records, pulled the text records. If you see that, say, Marty texts Robert at 9:55 and he received it off of Tower 88, then that puts this whole argument to bed. But we don't have that information.
So even though they have text records for a lot of other people, there must have been some reason that they couldn't get those text records. Because I'm sure they would have used them and made them available if they could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay.
Moving on. So I guess we
Yeah.
talk about the next day. We went up.
Yeah.
Went up to the crime scene. It was snowing. It was nice,
Yeah.
which made things a little tricky for us because we actually brought a wheelbarrow up there and we're going to do some experience. But it had rained the night before and then it was cold and snowing, so the ground was
Very
like
cold and packed down.
moist and cold and packed down. So it was tough to really do a whole lot there. But the big thing that I think that we accomplished was we found the point of origin. We're 99% certain we found the point of origin,
Right.
and we did that by like wandering back in the desert. And I'm for these lowlanders down here, I'm very impressed with Janet and everybody else that was out there because it was freaking cold. And I'm from Michigan,
Yeah,
so
it's like
I'm
30
out there in my
degrees.
flannel, like
With
let's
wind.
let's
Yeah.
do this. But they're all there. But we went to kind of where we thought it was, and then we were searching all over for any indicator, and then we took the video that's now on our YouTube that I kept referencing on our YouTube channel, where they started at the point of origin and then videoed the path. And at the beginning of the video, he like pans around and you see like this tree that's up there, and then there's a bush with a tree that comes out of the bush. And actually, Brandon pointed out that from someone he did a story with or whatever was talking about in the desert how
Slowly many plants grow and
Yeah.
how much stays unchanged through time.
things don't change in the desert. So like back home, like a dead tree like that in 2 years would be gone because of all the moisture and bacteria and everything. But now he had said that like, no, those trees should still be there.
Yeah.
And so we spent hours just going all over the place comparing.
Frame by frame. Like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if I can see this here, I've got to be able to see this here, this here, this here, this here in the frame.
Yeah, line it up
Matching
with
everything up.
Yeah, with the mountain range behind you, and then that was tricky because the fog would come in, and then you couldn't see the mountain range, and then the fog would come on, and you could see it again. But we found this bush that has this. You'll see it if you watch the video. There's like a bush with like dead tree branches coming up out of it, and we found it, and like to the point, like we were lining it up with the camera, looking, and every branch is it's the tree. And then there was a big tree next to it, which wasn't there, but we could see a stump and where somebody had cut the tree up for firewood. So we were very confident we found the point of origin. Then I turned on a GPS tracker, marked the location, and then tracked it back using the video to track it back. And it sure wasn't 180 yards or 165 yards. It was 352 yards from
Wow.
the point of origin to the wheelbarrow.
That's what
And-
everyone kept saying. When we finally found the place, Shiloh was like, I feel like we're really far back here. And we were like,
way
yeah,
back
maybe
there.
that's just a illusion because it's cold or something.
And you
but
can see it on the video, like on that video when he's walking.
that video goes on forever.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes, and you see like just count his steps. I haven't done it, but you could like count his steps, like boom, 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 like how long it takes for them to get all the way. And the 352 yards is as the crow flies. Like I marked a track, but then I got there and shot a line on my GPS software, 352 yards from point to point. So the walk would have been 400 yards or
Right,
more. Winding around. So it was way back there.
Yeah.
Which got us thinking like, okay, so if the state's theory is they killed her out there, first of all, it's so pitch black. I can't fathom walking that far out into that mess.
Right.
And it's a maze because everything kind of looks the same. But then they
And
went
there's no clear paths.
Yeah, there are no paths anywhere. So then you go all the way up to the house and then get the wheelbarrow, and like the point I made was you would never find the body again.
Yeah.
To go back, especially in the dark, all the way back there and find the body, to put the body in the wheelbarrow, Like, just seems insane to me. And then, yeah, and then like Shiloh said, well, maybe somebody, maybe it was like, well, you stay here and mark the
Right.
spot. But that
Yeah,
also
fair.
requires them to know that there's a wheelbarrow back at the house. Plus the fact that they had to miracle it out there without making a track on the way
Right.
out to get there. There's all kinds of obviously problems with it, but
It's just very confusing. And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not, I'm not, I mean, I'm never pretended to be a detective, but just experientially for me, it was very confusing to imagine that being the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
That's what I sort of walked away with. It's a really complicated case and it's really confusing. But that to me was whether or not it was Robert and Christian, I just don't see the scenario where that happens out there and they managed to do all that, or that anyone managed to do that.
yeah, no,
I just
the idea, especially when you see where the point of origin actually was, in my opinion, the idea that anyone, Robert and Christian, or a mafia hitman, or
Right.
whatever it is you think happened,
right.
the idea of Becky being killed out there
Yeah.
is nonsense. It's,
Yeah,
it's,
can't
I
see-
feel
I
like,
can't see it.
yeah, it's just my opinion, but that is nonsense that they would have brought them all the way, brought her all the way back
Yeah.
from that position. There's just no way. And also, we also pointed out when you ran out that way, that if you were running to it, well, I guess if their theory is the hike, that doesn't matter. But it was like, why would you just run straight back? Because it's not as far off to the side as I thought. It's straight back
Yeah.
is where it came from, and it was like, well, if you were running away, why wouldn't there's Sharon Coleman's house is right there. Once you're out, why wouldn't you go out that way?
Right.
So with it, so that yeah, that we accomplished that. Out there, and then we took the wheelbarrow out in the desert, and we actually had Janet like get into the wheelbarrow and me push it just because I wanted to see what that was, the balance and stuff. And truthfully, I didn't get the results I was expecting there. I was expecting to be like, her legs are in my way and I can't move and it's very wobbly. But I was able to push her just fine in the wheelbarrow. So that didn't shake out. It was a little tricky getting over
Right.
the terrain, the constant like bumps and stuff like that was tough, but it was actually much easier than I thought it would have been to push you in the wheelbarrow.
That was a very grim, surreal, and hard moment. To be
Yeah.
honest with you, that was really, really hard. I don't want anyone to think that felt good or anything like that. It was really good to be up there because I know I bring this up a lot, and I know it's kind of a downer, but it is really horrible what happened to these folks. It's really, really horrible. And when you're up there and you see the foundation and you see, just bits of pottery and evidence of a home and a family, it's really, really hard.
And you had a real hard time when
it was
you
really
got
hard.
in the wheelbarrow.
It was really hard. And I mean, that's important. That's important to check in with. It's we love the puzzle of it. I think that's what draws many of us here, but we also are drawn to just wanting to make sure the right people are held accountable. And if they are, they are. But I don't see it. I don't see it.
Yep. So, other than that, there was a witness we were looking for that we were able to track down yesterday, and it kind of ate up. That ate most of our time. We had the fan meetup last night, which went off without a hitch, in Palm Desert, and then tonight, you guys, 2 days after when you're hearing this, 2 days ago, we're heading up tonight to L.A. to do that meetup with Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott and some mystery guests
Yeah.
will be there.
Yeah. Well, the meetup last night was wonderful, and it was so fun to see some folks whose names I know from the Facebook and from this YouTube chat, and it was lovely.
Yep. I think I saw Kristen Hunter's in the YouTube chat right now. We got to meet
She was
her
there last night. Yeah.
Yep.
Met her husband. It's great.
And with that, and
We
I
gotta
want to
find out from Zach what he thought about the episode. Let's not forget that. I'm dying to know.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, Zach, just so you know, to be fair, I did ask you how your week was before we talked for 45 minutes.
You're fine. You're absolutely fine.
But what did you think of the episode?
Oh, the fire's there. I love hearing it in Bob's voice. See, I can do that too, Bob. I have to cough away from the microphone.
That's right.
No, the fire's back in Bob, and I love hearing it. This is vintage Bob. I mean, from anybody that's listened in the past, I mean, we all love a good Bob rant, and it was in there over and over again. And hearing it really helps me know where we're going with this case. And him breaking down the business card, whether it's the chain of custody, I mean, we have some questions about the chain of custody, which I think is huge. If LeClaire really didn't find that business card, and where did it come from? And then we have all the fingerprint, the fingerprint problems and the DNA problems, and it all adds up. And it's interesting to see where we're going to go from here.
Yeah.
All right. And your thoughts? So I never asked you. This whole time, I've never asked you what you thought of the episode.
No, it doesn't matter because I agree with all the listeners. So I'll just be agreeing along the way as we talk about some of the feedback they had.
Okay. Well, let's get into their questions.
Okay, great. We'll get to the point where once we get into sort of the DNA on the card and on the sock and other places, I think I'll probably be lumping together a bunch of questions because people had really great perspectives on the natural questions that would come up next, which I don't think you got to go into very much, which are how was this information conveyed to the jury? What was left in? What was left out?
Yeah.
You know, what did it actually look like when it was presented to the jury? And I don't know how deeply you want to go into that. And I know we have a DNA episode that's coming up, so some of that stuff might be addressed there. But
I hate to derail you, but real quick,
Sure.
we're getting the question because we brought it up in somebody. There's a little bit going on in the YouTube chat
Sure
about.
thing.
Becky in the YouTube chat just said, "Why wouldn't Robert have record of the text if he knew that it would help with an alibi? Because he didn't know he needed an alibi. They talked to him the day after, and then he never heard from the police until the fall of 2007, a year later. And even then, he didn't know when they were saying things happened. He didn't know the timeline. So like Robert had no idea that going to get the chapstick could have been an alibi.
Otherwise, he would have done the thing that, you know, somebody with law enforcement in his family, I'm not saying this makes him guilty, but Javi, you know,
was like, I talked to her at this time.
Let me show
Look right
you this.
here.
I will show you my phone. And maybe he didn't do that because the text wasn't there, but I don't know why you would sit in a room saying you got a text from someone that is a police officer and then not be ready to deliver the goods on that.
Yeah, and it was just kind of nonchalant as he was walking through his day. So yeah, it would have been phenomenal if they were like, well, can you show me your phone records or show me your phone and let me verify some times? But they didn't do that. He didn't know he needed an alibi, one, didn't know when the alibi needed to be for, two, and then it was a year later when they finally started looking at them as a suspect, when they did like the search warrants and stuff in their house, and he still didn't know. Like it's not like, and not just this case, any case, it's not like the police are like, I want to talk to you because I think that at 9:46 p.m. you lit Becky on fire up in the wheelbarrow up in the crime scene, and then we know that you checked your voicemail at 10:23. We want to know if you had any phone activity in between there. That's just not how it works. They pretty much keep you in the dark. He had no idea what he was supposed to be alibying himself from.
Right. Okay. Well, let's start with, well, I'm going to go ahead and start with Cindy. And I guess we're wading into this a little early, but I know Leah also said something similar. Cindy says, holy crap, this episode blew me away. I love that we're getting into the actual evidence against Christian and Robert, or should I say lack of evidence. Do you know if their lawyers are investigating the DNA from Becky's sock? Did anyone get their DNA tested besides Christian and Robert? Is there any way to have genetic genealogy run on it?
Yeah, so you guys are going to hear on Sunday an episode with a DNA expert where we discuss a lot of the things. A lot of the things you hear discussed in that episode have been passed on to the attorneys who are working on the habeas. And so, yeah, the hope is that there will be some more work done on that DNA. And I guess this is as good a place as any to point out that in the report that I had tons and tons of DNA reports and all the stuff that I sent all to our experts. But you're going to hear her talk about how frustrated she is that the DNA on the socks that they only compared to Robert and Christian and nobody else. Since then, we have found more documents that shows that they did compare it to the known profiles they had, to answer your question. So they had Javier, Jacob, Ron, I have to go back through and go through everybody, but the people whose known profiles they had, they did compare it to all of them, and it didn't match any of them either. And this is a very solid profile. It literally says on the report, CODIS ready, and then it was never run through CODIS. And I know when Andrew and I were talking about that, he said, "Oh, they probably did, and it's just as protocol." But as it turns out, that it was confirmed by the attorneys that it was never run through CODIS.
I don't understand that.
Yeah, so it was compared to all of the people that we have talked about, all of the teenage group and all that, and Ron Friedley, and it didn't match. None of that DNA matched any of them. But no, it has not been run through CODIS.
Yeah. Okay. Going into John for a moment. Jill says, has John's weed dealer ever been identified? Considering the money disappeared over the weekend, I would guess it would be a Pinion resident. So there's kind of two things happening there. Whether or not it's about John or the weed dealer, I wanted to make sure I included this, Jill, because having now been up there for me, it reinforces this idea of familiarity with the area. I mean, and that's not that could be any number of people. Obviously, people we know and people we don't know, but boy, it's confusing up there.
Yeah, you
And
get turned
just a
around real
very,
quick. Easy.
very, very daring thing to do if you're like, I don't really know this area, but let's do this. It's just,
Yeah.
it's hard not to imagine somebody really knowing the area. But what are your thoughts on that? And the weed dealer thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so much that we would have to speculate about to get there.
Got
you know
it.
what I mean? So we don't know. Like we've heard stories that he smoked. There was nothing in his system. We don't know how maybe that was affected by the fire. And there wasn't. We don't see at least an exorbitant amount of money being like disappearing for like I said, $160, $200 a weekend or whatever is going to something. So yeah, I don't know. And no, I doubt there's any way for us to, unless. I doubt there's any way for us to figure out like if there was a weed dealer who it was.
Right. Kristen, this was a really good thought because it ties into the books. And so, Kristen, you said you're a little behind, and so you were catching up. I'm so glad you were behind and catching up because this brings up something that we didn't really talk about with the books and cashing checks. She says, could it be that John was just cashing his checks and not depositing them? Not that he was making less those last 3 months. Is there a comparison to what the company had listed by check to what was actually cashed? So I think you did match up. It sounds like you did with
The stuff from
Rutherford,
Rutherford, yeah.
match that up. But that got us thinking, Kristen, and I think you were kind of implying this too, is what if you get a check for $500 from someone who's paying you under the table, but they still have to write you a check? If you don't go to your own bank, if you go to the bank, if they're Wells Fargo and you're Bank of America, and you want to cash that check at Wells Fargo, will there be a record of that on your side anywhere in your finances? Right. If we don't know who wrote that check, we'll never know that check existed. Or is there some way that it would show up in John's financial records, even though he didn't deposit it into his account?
Yeah, no, I think that if he took it to so even forget Bank of America, say somebody at Chase Bank wrote him a check.
Yeah.
If he took that check to a Chase Bank, the drawing institution, and cashed it, they can check to make sure it clears right then and give him the cash, and there would be no record of that. And so, but we did match up everything from Rutherford, like everything, all the work he did for Rutherford. He got the checks and he deposited it. It's been said by multiple people, including Rutherford, that he was also doing other jobs for other people, and those we don't see any record of that going in. So, is it possible he was cashing those checks or working for cash? That's possible, but we don't know because that's the nature of working in cash and not having a record of it. We have no record and way of knowing that that happened.
Right.
But we also, if that was the case, that would be they were struggling financially and they were bouncing checks and in those. So it would be strange, I think, based on what we see in their other history. If it's like, oh, I do have this extra $5,000 over here, but I'm going to let us keep bouncing our checks and not pay our bills and not deposit that and then of course that's where the speculation comes in. It's like, well, maybe there was this thing he was spending all that, and it could be, but we don't know. We don't have evidence of that.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk some more about the card. We'll start with Sarah. Sarah says, and Sarah, you always have questions like this, and I love it. You're always very good at saying, how typical or atypical are these behaviors from law enforcement or from criminals or from... So this is one of Sarah's classic questions, which is how typical/atypical is it for evidence not to be immediately checked in and recorded?
Well, I mean... I'm sure that depends agency to agency. I will tell you the typical protocol. So like when I was going through this episode, I contacted multiple detectives that I know from multiple agencies around the country to ask them about, when I was researching this episode about how this card was collected. And what I got from all of them was that should never have happened. Like there's no department in the world that has a protocol that says, oh, you're out on the crime scene, there's crime scene text there, and a detective should just grab something and not mark it and not label it and not log it in, with the other evidence markers and stuff. I will say to be fair that Andrew, who used to work for Riverside, had a little, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I guess you guys can talk to him on the Facebook page, but he said it's problematic and it shouldn't have been done that way. But he certainly doesn't agree that it means that it was planted anywhere. The detectives I talked to from other jurisdictions all basically told me that there's a big problem here. Something wrong happened here. Whether that's he just screwed up or whatever, but they're all like, that's not right.
Got it. So sounds like atypical at least from the research you've done.
Yeah, I want to point out too, just from the YouTube chat, somebody in the YouTube chat was making the argument about how Robert and Christian were known to have the same brand of shoes that were in the desert, and as that being evidence. I'm sorry, but that's the most laughable thing. The idea that they like to wear Vans in Southern California in 2006 describes every single person in Southern California in 2006. Right. I've been noticing adults at the meetup last night. I'm always looking at people's shoes around here. They're extremely popular brand of shoe. What we do know is that they did go, and we'll talk about this later, they did go get the Vans that they owned and compared them and found out that they were not a match.
If they're not a match, that's what's difficult for me is like, I think that's important information to take and to consider. I just would hope that the standard, for me personally, if this happened to me and I were innocent, I would hope that the standard of proof wouldn't be
they were
have
known
shoes
to
like
own
that.
Vans.
That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that, the wheelbarrow tracks with Vans, like, of course I perk up and go, wait a minute, I feel the standard of proof should be that they're the exact same shoe, but that's just me kind of putting myself in that position going like, oh my God, if I regret that I wore the shoes that everyone wore in Southern California that didn't exactly match, I would, that just breaks my heart to think like, I hope that's not all there is, and that's kind of why we're going piece by piece. Sue says, how did the prosecution show that the business card was dropped there when the murders were committed and not sometime before the murders?
It wasn't questioned. So am I understanding the question right? Like how did the prosecution show?
Like, I think Sue's saying, even if it is exactly where Leclerc found it, even if all of that is true, and it was 25 yards away without footprints leading to that 25 yards away, right? The fact that it was there, feeling significant, and feeling significant enough for Leclerc. If you imagine that he did it exactly as he did it in his report, Sue's still saying like, wasn't there any sort of reasonable doubt that the card could have been there already in that exact location?
Yeah, so it was kind of brought up on cross. They mentioned, I believe the lawyers used the term that it was weathered. They kind of suggested that it was sun stained, but they just didn't land. They didn't do what we just did, which was to really break down every single element. I don't think that they saw or cared or thought to look into the idea that a witness went on the news and said, I know exactly where that card came from because we found it and gave it to the detectives. And it's unfortunate because that evidence should, and it should be also noted that the first time they were arrested, the first judge wasn't having that card. Like was just,
really?
Like there was the first one, and we're going to get into all this, but the first time they were arrested, the judge had issued bench warrants for the prosecutor and some of the DA investigators to answer for the shit that they were doing in this case. It was bad, and the judge was just like, that business card. Essentially, that business card means nothing. You do not you don't have enough going on here. They issued bench warrants. They held them in contempt. They wanted the prosecutor to come in and testify to what was going on, and then the prosecutor just dropped the charges, and that was the end of it.
Whoa, I didn't know any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is new info rolling out. I mean, as we get more into the actual case and the trial itself, I think there's going to be maybe a lot of moments where we're all kind of like, okay.
Everybody's so badly wanted to hear the case against Robert and Christian, how it happened. Just know that you're going to be very angry for the next several weeks as we go through it and you see how this case was built.
Yeah. Okay. Lori says, what would be the motive of the detectives to give misinformation about how the business card was obtained and where it was found? Great question, Lori.
The motive from Leclerc?
Mm-hmm.
So this is one thing that has come up, obviously, like in the fan meetups and stuff that people were meeting out here is like, how would they know to frame Christian and Robert or whatever? Just to be clear, I don't think that's what happened at all. I think that they blew the crime scene investigation. They left at, as I said, the wheelbarrow is the most egregious thing that it's literally full of evidence. There could be bullet fragments in there. And I know you can't take everything, and it's big and it's kind of bulky, but I would be okay if they processed it on the scene. If they're like, let's dust it for fingerprints, let's swab the whole wheelbarrow for DNA, let's do everything we can do, let's sift through, let's collect everything that's inside of it and take that so that we can then test that. And they took a little fluid sample for accelerants, but that's all they did. If they had done all that and said, okay, now we can leave it there, but that's not what they did. They took the one body that had physical evidence on it, And the one piece of evidence, the wheelbarrow itself, that was full of all of the forensic evidence, the most forensic evidence we could have, and they just left it and just took the handles from it. That's so egregious, and it's not intentional. I don't think that's misconduct. I think that's incompetence. And I'm not even saying that like Ramirez, the crime scene officer, I'm not saying he's incompetent. I'm saying that was an incompetent move. That should have been taken.
That's how I saw it. Honestly, I saw it more as that was Leclerc covering his own ass. So like something got botched there. It wasn't that necessarily they were trying to use that right then for Robert and Christian. It was more that like, oh shit, this card might be important and I missed it, but I'm gonna pretend like I didn't miss it, so I'm covering my own ass.
Yeah, and truthfully, it wasn't his job to find it. So I don't even think it's quite that. It was Ramirez's job to find it. So the way that I think that this happened was they only collected 15 pieces of evidence. They left the wheelbarrow there, which, by the way, there's a whole conversation to be had about that. Then the family gets released and goes up to the crime scene, and they left the wheelbarrow that still contains pieces of their loved one in it. Is awful.
Oh my goodness.
But they left all that. They only collected certain things. They left the cars. They left all the stuff in the cars, all that stuff. And then now they start getting into the investigation, and they immediately honed in. Becky must be the target. They talk to Robert, and they talk to Javier. They talk to Jacob. They're talking to these people about the case, or realizing they don't have anything. Nobody's coming out and confessing. There's no obvious witness. This case isn't going to be easy to solve. They're going to need evidence, and they don't have any. So I think likely, my hypothesis is that group, just like the individual in the news said, they were rummaging around out there and they found the card. You heard Leclerc when he talked to Javier, oh, there was this pregnancy thing with Becky. So Leclerc's got that on his mind. And then they're like, and hey, we found this on the crime scene. And then he's like, oh, this could actually be evidence, but this is not, now it's not, there's no chain of custody. I can't use it for evidence. I don't think he was like, we can get Robert and Christian with this. I don't think that's at all what happened.
I don't think that either.
I think he's like, shit, this could be evidence. This could be a part of the case. And then I think that they went out and then just made it part of the case. They had to do some revisionist history, he did, to make it look as though they found it on the scene in a place where they can now, connect it to the crime in case it's evidence. But you should look at, not for nothing, when I was talking about, I kind of put it as a throwaway comment that when they tested that card for fingerprints, they tested it against Robert, Christian, and Bo Nash. Has anybody thought since then to wonder why they would test it against Bo Nash?
I mean, definitely someone in the follow-up asked that exact question. I just can't remember who it was.
Oh, so
someone absolutely said,
when you find that name,
Let
me just give you a situation, right? A hypothetical situation. Let's say Bo Nash was up at the crime scene with Javier, which we know he was, and he found the card, and he gave it to Leclerc. And then they process the card for fingerprints and find, oh, there's 2 fingerprints on here. But we know that Bo handed it to Leclerc. So we have to eliminate Bo's fingerprints because we know his could be on there because we know that he touched it.
Shout out to Valeria who says, me, me, me. I think I know that means you.
Yeah.
Valeria, big surprise. You always have great stuff.
Yeah, so that's, and again, this is all just... When I was talking with Andrew about it, and I wanted to, because Andrew's a super good guy, and he's extremely helpful and open to having conversations, and it's good to have that other person. When I'm saying, well, I think this means this, and he's like, oh, well, I think it could mean this. So we had a lot of that where he's explaining to me why he thinks that maybe these things aren't nefarious, and I'll say to all of you what I said to him is there's a hell of a lot better circumstantial case that card was not found where Leclerc said he found it, when he said he found it. There's a lot better circumstantial case for that than there ever was that Robert and Christian committed this crime. So if you're willing to take the crazy roundabout circumstantial case and be convinced that Robert and Christian committed this, then I don't think it's being intellectually honest to look at this and being like, but that can all be explained away.
Intellectually honest is a really, really good phrase that we could probably use multiple times, every follow-up and every... I think that's a great way of putting it. I want to shout out Laura and Ellen and Kim and other folks. There are this kind of that cluster of stuff about what came in, what was, how was this communicated to the jury? I'll read Laura's, but were there any challenges by the defense on the business card being admitted as evidence, like chain of custody, if they tried to argue that based on that news interview, someone other than the police found the card or could have found the card, or any objections about the DNA/fingerprint results based on multiple labs having different findings? So that's also Jeff and Brian and Megan and Gary and Sarah. They're saying, what did the jury see? How did they know about all of those other tests? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so all that stuff was brought up in cross-examination. In my opinion, where the lawyers made a big mistake is to not then put up their own experts. Put up their own expert to explain things. So all they did was, through cross-examination, raise doubt against that. And if you read in the transcripts, which we're going to get to the actual trial and the transcripts of how this shook out coming up, but you'll hear there's even some smart ass comments from the we went from 320,000 to 28 trillion. But I'll tell you this: make sure you listen Sunday, because after talking to our DNA expert, I'm very comfortable saying that Christian touched that card. I think that's I don't think that that's actually in question. Whether the fingerprints are his, I certainly have my doubts there, because that is very, if you going from not comparable to a match, different softwares, different things can get there. But from the conversations I have had with fingerprint experts, going from we have data points that specifically rule somebody out, and then later saying we have data points that specifically include them, is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So something's going on there. I don't know what that is, but that part is bad. But as far as the jury, the state was just good at trying to explain things away. For example, the DNA on the sock, the actual DNA that's on the actual victim's body, and the things that we know the killer actually touched, those DNA profiles, those were explained away. Well, there was firefighters there that extinguished her, so they were around and they rustled things up, and they were using foam in their water lines, and that will distort the DNA. And this is not the expert; this is the prosecutor in closing. These things could all make those results not me.
And will we find out from the DNA expert whether that's accurate?
No, because I didn't even bring that up, because I know that that's not accurate.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. First of all, they were using Class A foam, which is just soap. Okay. They weren't using Class B foam, which you would use for a gasoline spill, which does actually have animal proteins in it. But animal proteins aren't human proteins. They don't change your DNA, and they don't make DNA look like it's human when it's not. It's very clearly animal DNA.
So if something were altered, if the DNA were altered in some way by that kind of material, that's something that a DNA expert would say, clearly something's been distorted or something's been wrong. It wouldn't look like a perfect set of DNA that belonged to someone else because it had been slightly altered by soap.
Yeah, rather than what she's saying, which is your killer's DNA is right here, and there's a very good profile of it, and they never looked to see who it was.
Okay. Carrie, I saw your question about newer DNA results, different types of testing. Certainly that's something that I think came up for a lot of us, including with the fingerprints, was just the sort of idea of wanting to give the benefit of the doubt to the investigation and say, we know that things advance. We know MVAC is different and wasn't available for a long time. So I think just getting that continued clarification about the kinds of tests that were used and the advancements in technology, and whether or not those things could have or would have had an effect to where suddenly it is his fingerprint or suddenly it is someone's DNA. You know.
To my knowledge, and I'm going to try to get an expert to come on to talk about the fingerprints, but to my knowledge, that's not the case with the fingerprints. With the DNA, certainly, when I was reading those reports and going through it, and as I said repeatedly in the episode, I'm no expert in this. I'm just telling you what my layman brain sees here. And I was like, this is preposterous that it went from this to this. And you'll hear on Sunday the DNA expert go, no, it's because they did this, and this is how they were. They were reading the data with different amplifications and different things, and that part is explained away. Okay. It's a little perplexing. The volume, which I had mentioned before, the volume of DNA that they got after multiple swabs on that is how did she put it? She's just like, it's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Janelle says, let's go back to the ninhydrin, which is a word I did not know until that episode. Janelle says, how, with ninhydrin being known to decrease DNA yields, can they then increase the DNA quantity off the business card? We've been talking about this, especially with touch DNA sometimes being less than 20 cells. Sort of what we're circling around.
So she's wanting to know how they got more DNA, so much DNA when ninhydrin. I don't know that, and maybe she has some kind of expertise in this. I don't know that ninhydrin degrades, or what was the word she used?
Decrease DNA yields.
Decrease yields. By using those terms, that makes me feel like she knows what she's talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that ninhydrin decreases yields.
Okay.
But so it maybe it does.
Well, I think I would imagine, I could be totally wrong, Janelle, but maybe the idea when in the episode you said that once you've used it, you've got what you've got. And
as far as the fingerprints,
maybe that's but that would be me maybe misunderstanding.
Yeah.
The
So
question
let me
too.
just,
So
I guess let me just
sorry,
kind of let me just break down this, so and we'll say hopefully it'll catch what she's trying to say. So the way it works, they get the business card, they have it, and it's not something that they can really dust. They probably could have, but they didn't dust it. Instead, they put it into like a glass container, and then they put this ninhydrin gas in there, and the ninhydrin attaches to amino proteins, and then it causes them to turn darker. So the more there are, the darker it gets. The card itself is going to change colors because it's made from paper and pulp, and there are aminos in the pulp. So that's going to change colors, and then you're looking for the fingerprints, the oils and the proteins from your fingerprints to really pop out of there because there'll be an excessive amount of aminos there. So that's all the ninhydrin does. Maybe it does decrease some yields, but I know that it's done regularly. I was in a fingerprint lab where they used ninhydrin on fingerprints in front of me, showed me how to do it, and then swabbed the prints for DNA for me. So I don't know that it decreases the yields. The big thing for the ninhydrin for me was what it showed about the sun staining on the card, which I'm trying to find someone much more qualified than to me that can speak to that.
That shouldn't be hard.
There's one right there on the Zoom.
Ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would like to have a scientist of some kind that can do experiments and actually do like experiments that can be replicated, or maybe they already exist out there to show that, look, there's as much as a lot of people may not like it, there's no question to the science of what I said as far as it being the sun show the ninhydrin patterns on that card show that it was in the sun for a long time. What I want to do is to have some kind of a scientist of some kind that can do some controlled, valid experiments that can tell us how long that card was in the sun.
Right.
And so that's something that I'm
That would be really interesting.
working on.
Yeah, Zach, what did you think about? I'd love to hear your perspective on when Bob gets to the point in the episode where he says, these are all of the things that you should know about the science and why some of that is potentially very problematic in terms of how it was presented to the state. But let's throw all of that away and say Christian touched the business card. What was that moment like for you when you were listening to the episode where you're like, well, don't say that. That might mean, you know what I mean? Like, what was your reaction?
It's this whole point is very disheartening. The idea that they can continually test this card over and over again and come up with different ideas of what's on the card, whether it's fingerprints, whether it's the DNA, it's upsetting, and it's upsetting that they are able to just talk it away. I guess is where I'm going with it. It's the fact that we can just nonchalantly say, yep, it's there now, and we're going to pretend like nothing else is there. It's upsetting.
Yeah. But I thought it was interesting just to sort of say, like, these are all things that you need to know about the science of the investigation and the tests that were done. But all that being said, if the card has Christian's print on it, does that do what the state says it does?
Right.
And put
him, I think I misunderstood your
question.
question.
In the scene as a confirmed 100% this has to be a murderer kind of scenario, just based on where the card was and if the card was where it was and all that kind of stuff.
All right. I think I misunderstood what you're asking.
Well, I was just curious because for me, I had a little tight moment like, but I don't want Christian to have touched the card. That's important. Mm-hmm. And then just sort of hearing you move on and go, but of course, that doesn't actually mean anything. But the thing that's important about it is that even if all of those things are true, like you still have to be integritous. I'm not sure that's a word. You still have to use that integrity to get the results to be true and to be right and to be accurate and to be fair,
Right.
whether or not it matters that he touched it. Is
Yeah.
that kind of what you're
Yeah,
saying?
and I really looked like my approach to the episode was my approach to the investigation of my research and investigation of the business card, which was I want to look at it for in a couple different ways. One, I want to know. Well, it started off as two. One, I want to know, did he touch the card? And two, I want to know, is the card relevant to the crime?
Right.
And then as I started getting into that, I started finding out this, all the problems with the collection. So then it became a three-phase approach, which is one, where and when was the card found?
Yeah.
Two, does it have, did Christian touch it? And three, is it relevant to the crime regardless of who touched it?
Right.
And so that's how that was laid out. And obviously, the Reader's Digest version of the episode is, I don't believe it was found where they found it when they said they found it. I do believe Christian touched it, and I don't believe it has anything to do with crime.
Well, there you go. That's simple.
Yeah, I mean,
Kristen, I see your
there's
note
a
about
very
wanting-
likely chance that he did give it to her at some point, or that Robert gave it to her at some point, and it worked its way into that house. But we have that giant trash pile that everybody's talked about now. It could have been there. It could have blown off of there pretty easily, I think. So I think you're right. I don't think it's a huge stretch to say that Christian touched that card. But like you said, does it do anything to the murder? Is it involved in the murder in any way possible? I don't see how it could be.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'll go so far as to say that I believe the science proves he touched it.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
And to your point, Kristen, and maybe we're not using it for the same outcome, but I love what you're saying, that if there have been advancements in testing, wouldn't you want to retest just to be sure? Could not agree more, because that's how people have also gotten out of prison. That's how the right people have been caught in unsolved cases. I would say, if there are advancements in DNA testing, I'd love to see the DNA on her body tested.
Yeah,
As
so we
advancements
should have an
continue. So that
evidence.
just seems like a fair, let's test that. That's fair. There's been advancements. Let's retest those fingerprints. Let's retest the DNA. Let's retest the DNA on the socks that we don't know anything about.
So there was so much DNA, so you guys understand this, there was so much DNA on her socks that they were able, with just a simple swab, get, I believe there was 2 profiles with the DNA test with a mixture, and then they did the YSTR, which only identifies male profiles. They were able to get 3, and I believe 2 out of the 3 are like full CODIS ready.
Yeah.
Well, you can't use YSTR through CODIS, so I think those came from the first round with just the regular DNA testing. Full profile. That's a lot of DNA on the sock that's on the victim's foot, that's crumpled around the bottom of her foot because of something happened there, some sort of struggle. It's just, and I'm sure.
I guess I just need an explanation as to why you wouldn't run it. I just, for me
Was it tested
personally, it's
against
just me,
any-
but I need that explanation.
Was it tested against any of the firefighters that were on the scene?
No.
Nope. No, but they
I mean,
they didn't
there's-
touch her. They never touched her. They and they're wearing bunker gears and gloves and everything, and they sprayed it. But yeah, I want an explanation to why. I'd love to have an explanation as to why they didn't test it. I kind of know why, and also to without feeding into the negativity, I would love to know how there's so many people that are just so sure that they're guilty. Like, what kind of cognitive dissonance does it take to see that there's male DNA profiles, solid, lots of DNA,
Right.
on the victim's foot, and then how people can look at it and go, but that doesn't matter because Robert and Christian did it. Like, that's mind-numbing to me.
Well, maybe they just don't like you. Okay, Kara or Kara says, what interviews did LeClaire conduct in the days before? I like this question a lot. In other words, Kara's saying, or Kara, I hate when I don't know, but anyway, says, what interviews did LeClaire conduct in the day or days before he sent the business card to evidence, or what other investigation was taking place around that date that might have relevance to, depending on which version of events you believe, him receiving it or deciding to have it tested? I thought that was great because you're thinking globally. Like, what else is happening during those moments and in those interviews that would cause you to look at that business card and say, hold on, I got to take this seriously. And you touched on that before, but I just wanted to give a shout out because I thought that was a great perspective.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it would be worth going through and actually pinpointing dates of those things, because like what I looked at, it was sent to the lab on October 12th. That means Robert's interview, Christian's interview, Javier's 2 interviews. Actually, was it October 10th is when the second time, when he kept trying to go get Javier to take a polygraph. I believe that was like around October 10th. But Jacob Santiago's interviews, Bo Nash's interviews, Corey Donovan's interviews, all those interviews were conducted before it was sent to the lab.
Got it. Lauren says, did the other lab explain why there was? Okay, we covered that. Sorry, Lauren, shout out. You had another great question that we've kind of already touched on about the differences in the tests and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, here's Abby's. Abby says, this episode was great. Forget that part. I want your ego to
Could you repeat
grow.
that part again?
Nope, not going to do it. Abby says, I just need someone to break down the importance of the location of the business card and the wind for me. She says, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay. I'm glad you asked that, and it's a great question. So it's the state's theory is that, and the way they connect Robert and Christian in this case, the state's theory is that, I guess, like, Christian had that card in his pocket or something. And they all go out for this hike. And then when they get way out in the desert, at the end of the hike, there's a disturbance. Something goes wrong, and there's a fight. The place they call the area of disturbance. And Becky is killed right there. And the business card somehow comes out of his pocket or something right there. And then they go back to the house, get the wheelbarrow, come back and get her, bring her back. The significance is, so they start at the house, and they walked 350 yards north to where this happened, to where the fight, the whatever happened, however she died, the area of disturbance. And they're saying he drops the card, and then they go back to the house to the south, and they go back and get her. So there's no human, according to LeClaire, there is zero human activity, not a footprint, not a scuff in the sand, nothing from that point where the murder supposedly happened until 20 yards to the north. So as I said, 18 meters, 60 feet. You know, if you think of a baseball field from the pitcher's mound to the catcher's to home plate, the business card is found there. So it traveled through space to get somehow from the last place where there was human activity to this location. And the question is, how could it get there being attached to this crime? And so, like, for those of you that saw, like, the video I put up, I said, like, is it possible to just throw it? Like, if it was, heat of passion, somehow crazy, threw the card and it ended up there. That's impossible. It couldn't have been thrown that far. So then the only other solution that we have, like, how could it have gotten 20 yards to the north, would be wind. That the wind maybe blew it over there. That they dropped it right there in place, and the wind tumbled it out to the place where it was found. And the significant part of what we found is that from the time before the crime occurred until the next day after, well after the card was collected, there was a steady wind out of the northwest, meaning blowing from the north to the south.
Opposite direction of where it would have to have blown.
So if you imagine the kind of the scenario is, if imagine you're standing somewhere holding a business card and the wind is blowing in your face, and you need to get that card 60 feet into the wind, how do you get it there?
Right.
And the point I was making was, if somebody can figure out a way, I'd love to hear it, but it's impossible. It's literally physically impossible without footprints, without a human walking over there and putting it there.
Right.
The reason I brought up the wind earlier over in the days and weeks before that is because there were days where there were 30 and 40 mile an hour gusts of wind out of the south blowing out into the desert. And that is a plausible explanation. If it was like back at the house and the wind took it and blew it and it got caught up in a current and blew all the way out, it's still a long way,
right,
especially for nothing else to be out there, just the card.
Right.
But that could put it out there. But if that's the case, it is completely irrelevant to the crime, because that means it was out there before the crime occurred.
I know, but at least that potentially means that LeClaire didn't fabricate something, which I don't want him to. Let me just say for everyone, I don't want to live in the world where the law gets it wrong. I don't want to live. I want them to have got the right people. I want that because I'm terrified by the idea of living in a world where this happens. So that's part of why I'm showing up here is I don't want to look. I kind of, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to look at it, but I can't look away. And that's your fault. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.
You've put the fear of God in me, and now I'm like, if I can help at all to make sure this doesn't happen or isn't happening, and just feel safe that it's not, great. If it is happening, we got to work so hard together as a group to protect each other and to protect ourselves and to, get the right people in office and hold people accountable and all that stuff. Okay. I want to shout out Joel, who said, Joel, I love that you did the experiment. That makes me so happy. Joel says, how far should one be able to toss a crumpled up business card outside? I did it at home and it fluttered up in the air, landing about 2 feet in front of me. So shout out to you, Joel, for trying. Nice attempt.
I didn't air the one video because I did it a few times because I kept trying to find different ways. And actually, the video that I actually put up was the furthest I actually got it. The one before it, the very first one, I was like, again, like watching my watch. It's like, okay, 4-mile-an-hour wind this way, throw it. It literally went behind me. It went this way and went behind me.
Yeah.
And then I picked it up and I was like, see, and I was getting ready to post it, and I'm like, there's my cell phone number and everything on the card.
Idiot.
Better
Love
not
it.
use that take.
Love you, buddy. Okay. Carolyn says, I haven't looked myself, but if we look at the photograph taken of where the business card was found in the desert and look at other crime scene photos taken on the Monday after the murders, could we look at the sky, weather, clouds? Because, of course, you pointed out that there are some landmarks missing that would have been nice to have. Could we prove that the photos of the business card were not taken on the same day because the weather, light, sky, etc. looks different?
No, there's 2 pictures. It says they took 4. I've seen 2. One of them is in. They're weird. The way they're numbered isn't. I mean, there's so many. There's more. Like the number, the file numbers aren't like click up in the right order. There's all kinds of problems with it. But he says there's 4, and you got one that's taken from maybe 10 feet away. That all you see is just the card and a little bit of ground around it.
Right.
And then one up close.
Yeah.
And that's all we have of it. Like, you don't see the sky or background or anything. You see dirt and a shrub and just a little bit of stuff around there.
Yeah. Okay. Going to the wheelbarrow, you have expressed already, Scott was asking about what did happen to the wheelbarrow itself, not the handles. In the end, you mentioned that earlier. I mean, in the very end, I don't know, but in the, what's that sound?
Yeah.
I don't know. Water? Maybe there's something being picked up in the... There's this, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's, is it like water running?
It is coming from the room.
Okay. Did we put in a load of laundry that we don't remember putting in at all? I might have slept-walked.
Brandon must be taking a shower.
He might be
It's
taking
fine.
a
I just
shower.
thought something was wrong with the machine.
No,
And I
sorry.
Totally derailed it.
And this will, by the way, be the first shower he's ever taken, so this is exciting. Not true at all. He's very clean. Okay. So you mentioned that the wheelbarrow was not only not taken, but it was left out there.
Right. Yeah.
So that's fair.
You just want to know what
hurts my heart.
happened to it?
That hurts my heart. Yeah, I think just ultimately, since it wasn't collected, what happened?
Yeah, and I don't know that any... I mean, we heard from Chuck, who was there with Tiffany, like all those people saw it out there. It was just there. So I don't know if when they bulldozed the house, if it just went into the pile. Certainly nobody, I would think, would take it, like take it home or anything. So yeah, I don't know whatever became of it.
Sarah says, if the hike had happened, where would it likely have taken place in relationship to the house, wheelbarrow, and card location? And also wants to know, when did it last rain before the murder?
Oh, I know the answer to that. I knew the answer to that.
I believe you said it was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
but it's
it was
true that I don't think you have the exact.
Yeah, I don't remember
data
right now, but it was well before. So where the hike, where we found on our field trip, the point of origin, it was hopefully you're a spatial person, but it was 350 yards almost due north of the house.
Right.
And there is no path. It's bumpy, water washed out.
Right.
Just going through the pinyon pines and the creosote.
But we know that she went up there and there was a conversation about taking an actual circle, right? That she would do with John and stuff.
Yeah, there's a path
there's
up there.
path up there. I did that, but I think that's really important to define. I'm really glad you asked that, Sarah, because the path that we have heard exists and all of the little small roads that people could take and drive and walk and hike is not the same thing as walking out into the desert. By the way, I'm from the desert. I would walk forever without a trail. Like, it's doable. I definitely wouldn't do it at night.
Right.
But so the circumstances being what they are, they're just don't mistake a path that she was known to hike for where these
she
things
was found.
were found.
She was found in the middle of nowhere.
I think that's just important to keep in mind,
and
whatever
also,
you feel about the case.
Yeah, and also, like, if you look at like Apple Maps or Google Maps or whatever, you zoom in, like in front of, you'll see like the mountain range comes down, then it stops in a desert, and then there's the flat desert up towards the house. If you zoom in, you can see there's a path that runs in front of those mountains. And it connects down to the end of Jeroboa Street and goes up and then runs all the way around, goes to the area that Nick Crum said where they used to all hang out there in that kind of circle. and then all the way back down to Alpine. And we did hear that she did hike that sometime, but to hike that, you walk down Alpine to the end of Jerboa and get on the path, and then hike all the way around.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, sorry, I saw your note that someone in your life was falsely accused for something, and I'm very, very, very sorry to hear that. Truly, from my heart. Okay. Okay. Kelly, I want you to feel free to edit my do's, my dum-dum-dums, and it takes me a long time to find my place again. I don't think you always do that, so hopefully people find that charming. Okay, Rebecca says, I know we heard about the guns found in the house as belonging to John, but do we know when he purchased them? If he purchased them recently, I wonder if that could have been a sign that he felt he might be in danger. I thought that was interesting. We haven't really talked about the timing of gun purchases and stuff.
I don't know that they even attempted to figure that out. I know there's nothing, I've never seen where they have figured out. But we should mention yesterday we were going through just some old interviews and episodes, just kind of as it's the first time we've ever got to like sit in a room together and just chat about stuff for hours and hours.
I'm sorry to say it felt more like a slumber party than I'd like to admit.
Yeah.
It was like I had my phone on the bed. He was sitting at the table. Like.
Yeah, and we were going through and we were listening back through Bo Nash's first interview, and we caught something that we both missed the first time. And I
talked about it with Jeanette and Kristen last night at the meetup too.
Oh, did you?
And they were like, "Oh my God, he did say that."
Yeah, so when Bo was telling the police in his interview that he and Javier went to Becky's that night, he says, "Yeah, we got there, and John and Vicky were downstairs," and he says, Vicky was going to L.A. the next morning.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I never heard that before.
And definitely during the interview, that's like, it's so not germane to like what the story is that they're talking about, which is Bo being there and Becky and all that stuff. It's underneath there. It never gets asked about again. But there's another person who said
she was
his
leaving.
understanding
and so
was that she was supposed to be gone for whatever it's worth.
As of Friday night, that he said, that Vicky had told him that night when he said he met them and they talked, that Saturday morning she was going to L.A., which is what what we know from Tiffany and her coworkers and stuff. So whatever that's worth, but it again jumped out to me again, looking for the thing that changed. She was planning to make that trip that was out of character, according to Tiffany, and then something happened and the trip didn't happen.
Zach, I want you to know I'm acutely aware of us just blathering on and on and on about the stuff we've done more together. It hurts.
I'm looking up
I love you.
I'm looking up the Google map. I'll look at it.
Oh, nice. Yep. Okay. And then that's all I have, other than I know you have some information you wanted to make sure you end with about the upcoming episode, information that you now have since recording.
Oh, right.
So we're going to touch on that. But I wanted to throw Jennifer's question out there. What's the podcast holiday schedule? Let's preempt any whining and complaining. Happy holidays.
Yeah, thank you very much. And actually, that's so the stuff about Sunday's episode, I think I've already worked that in.
You did, okay.
Yep, and that is the fact that again, you're going to hear the experts say that they should have compared this to the known profiles they have, and I have since learned that they did. Oh,
okay, got it.
Yeah, so you're going to hear they should have compared it to Javier and Ron and Jacob and just all the people that she mentions in there. They did eventually compare those, and they were ruled out as the contributor. So I just wanted you guys to know that. She's going to explain. So Maya at the end, where I was like in the business card, it says that Christian's excluded as the minor, and I was like so mad about that. And she explains what that means. It's not as it doesn't really overrule what happened before, and she explains all that, which is why we bring on the expert. And again, like I said, your shirts, the shirts are all going to be printed and shipped out on January. She did say she was going to try to schmooze the manufacturing people and see if she can push our order up a little bit. So
it'll be a nice surprise. We'll expect longer, and it'll be a surprise.
Yeah, but if not, they'll all be shipped out second week of January. Our holiday schedule. So this episode, this Sunday in 2 days, is going to be the last main episode for this year. So because the next Sunday is Christmas Day, so we're not going to do that, and we want to make sure that everybody, all of our team, Janet and Zach and Kelly and Shane, and everybody can go travel and do whatever they want for the holidays. We will do a follow-up next week. So there will be a follow-up episode on the 23rd that we will record next Wednesday on the 21st, and then we'll be off for a full week. So there won't be a main episode on Christmas Day, and there will not be a follow-up episode that week. And then so the next main episode after this Sunday will be on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2023.
There we go.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
We're not as funny as SNL by a long shot. Our friends in the YouTube chat.
Yeah. And so with that being said, thank you guys. It's so weird that
I know.
it's complete opposite of normal. Me and
Zach.
Janet sitting
I
next to each
know.
other, and Zach all by himself.
Well, he's got Hulk Hogan, but
Right, he does
That
have
being
he
said.
does have the Hulk with him.
Yeah.
And gosh, I know I'm like rambling a little bit because I was like, was there something else? Was there something else that I was supposed to say? And I guess
Did you get out to Dunn Road?
Oh, good
Zach,
question.
great question.
Well, so we started to, and we got all the way to the point where there was a big gate with a chain on it that said Bureau of Land Management, no motor vehicles. So we had to stop. So, and that wasn't even that gate.
right.
I think the gate was there, but it was open a few months ago. But now it's like there and chained shut. Like, no, you can't drive down this road anymore. So nope, did not get down Dunn Road. Anything else, Zach, that I forgot?
Autumn has asked a couple of times. Autumn, I'm sorry I didn't catch it the first time. Whether or not you have any new updates on whether we'll be hearing from Robert or Christian directly.
No, I don't have any updates on that right now. Like I said, things are a little tricky right now to hear for them because they're right in the middle of prepping their habeas filings. You know, they're going to be filing their writs. So yeah, I don't know. We did get to talk to Robert for a couple of minutes just by happenstance the other day that he did we happened to be with his wife when he called and did a video chat, and we got to like say hi to him for a couple of minutes. But yeah, we maybe Robert, we may be able to just have Robert just to have a chat, but he won't be talking about
Pacifics, you're on the West Coast. Pacifics
that's right.
of the case.
I'm out here on the Pacific of the case. Yeah, specifics of the case right now. But we may be able to talk just so you guys. 'Cause I do want you guys to get to know him. But also, I feel like there was something with the phones with the because I've talked to him on the phone and recorded it, and everything was crystal clear. And then I listened back to the recording, and it was like it's almost like they have something.
They gibberishify it.
Yeah, they gibberishified it.
Yeah.
They got gibberishifiers at the California prisons.
Yeah.
All right, but everybody have happy holidays. If you have holidays that you celebrate, I hope they're great for you. If you don't celebrate any holidays, I hope you have a great couple of weeks. I'm saying this as though we're not going to do an episode next week.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah.
And
Well,
some
that
of
myself.
you, even though this comes out, by the time it comes out on Friday, we will have seen you. But we see those of you who are watching this live right now, very excited to see some of you tonight in LA.
Yes. Very good. So, and YouTube people, thank you very much. We will see you guys again. So there will be next week a follow-up. Again, same time, same channel, Wednesday. And that will be the actual last episode of 2022. We'll leave this year behind us. And with that, good day, YouTube.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye, guys.
All right, hit stop on our audio recording. YouTube folks, we love you. You guys are great. I'm gonna hit stop on that real quick, and then man, do I gotta pee real bad here.
That was
So,
an hour and 40 minutes.
it's a good one. That's a long time for me not to pee.